Okay, ladies and gentlemen, happy Monday. Welcome to Draglist Live, where we get to bench race with the world's top drag racers. My name's Bill Pratt. It's great to be with you tonight, and I'm so excited. We're bringing you Bob Larivee, Sr., Mr. Car Show. You'll find out why I call him that here in just a moment. Before we go to Bob, let's bring in John. John, how are you doing?
I'm doing great here, BP, and howdy from Houston, everybody. Please join us on the live chat. Tell us who you are and where you're from. I'll take notes and I'll pass your questions and comments along to BP and Bob.
Thank you, John. And great to see you, my friend. And folks, click the like and click the share button. Let your friends know we have Bob Larivee live right now. And without further ado, let's prove it. Let's bring him in. Bob Larivee, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bill, thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure. And look forward to talking to you guys and sharing some stories about hot rodding.
Look forward to having you on, sir. It's so let's you've done it for how many years now? 60s, maybe.
Well, I haven't driven a race car or a hot rod in many years because I'm 93 years old. But at any rate, I ran car shows for 51 years and I know circle track. I did drag racing for 1 year back in '57, I think it was, and I had a brand new car that I ran in super stock at the time, and I thought it was boring, and so I thought circle track sounded a lot more interesting, and so I did that for 25 years.
Wow.
And really had a great time. But my main job and the thing that really led me into the hot rod sport was my car shows, because we ran shows all over the United States. And as I've told you guys, we did Washington, D.C. and Houston. I started the Houston show in 1960 myself. I went down to Texas and booked dates in Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio, and called it the Texas Championship. And I was just a young guy. I was 27 years old, didn't know what I was doing. I often say sometimes we succeed because of our ignorance, because you do things not what people tell you what to do, but if you've got the guts, you do it on your own. And those shows in Dallas and Houston are still being run today. So not by me, but by my son's old company. So it's been a great life, and I've gotten to meet a lot of my heroes, and they all became my friends. Guys like Robert Peterson and Wally Parks and so many others that I'm not going to begin to list them, but we travel all over the country. We did shows in the United States, Canada, England, Alaska, Hawaii, and it was just a fantastic time. And I'm happy to say some of those shows are still being run to this day.
That's amazing. Well, I know we chatted a little bit yesterday, and in my history is threaded throughout yours in the latter years. We were just talking to John, and he's been to your Houston show. I was at the Cleveland Autorama in the 70s. I've been to your Ramrod Space show in the early 80s here when I moved to town. And of course, I knew some of the Ramrods. We actually saw some of them this weekend, and your old friend Hayne Dominic and Len Cottrell, among many others, were at the event. And I mentioned that you were coming on, and they send their best.
A great group of guys that we really enjoyed working with. And in fact, three of them ended up coming to work for us and moving to Detroit. Hayden was one of them. Mike Sheridan and Bill Moeller were all ramrods. So I guess it was a pretty good club. I hired three guys out of that club. And Bill stayed with me the longest. He worked for me for 17 years.
Wow.
And he lives presently in California.
Wow, so great. Yeah, Hayne would tell me about his ISCA days, and he eventually became the president of the International Hot Rod Association, of drag racing sanctioning body. That's when I met him back probably in the 1980s. And now he's still got his hand in. He still puts on events.
Well, I think it's just a great sport, and the thing that I said that's so great about it is, it's great fun to look at the cars in the show, but you don't really remember all of them. And I think the great thing about the sport is the people. And I've made so many great friends in the hot rod sport that, well, I just have friends all over the country. And that's been my big reward and something I think about every day. And I still run into a lot of these guys all over the country as I go to various shows. I'm still doing about 15 shows a year.
Wow.
And since 2010, I've been publishing books about hot rods, and I sell my books, and that's really been good. I get to stay involved and see everybody, and I really enjoy that.
You bet. Well, before we close tonight, we'll have to find out where folks can pick those up, and then we'll share that info. But,
all right.
Well, let's see. So let's take you back to the beginning. You're born and raised in Detroit, which was obviously a great car town, and started out as a sign painter in your dad's shop, right? Hand lettering cars and trucks.
Well, I was actually, believe it or not, I went to a real sophisticated high school. I was going to be a dentist because I'd had a lot of work done on my teeth, and my dentist was a great guy. And I thought, gee, if I could be like him, that would be a nice life. But I was in the soapbox derby when I was 15 years old, right after the war, and just 1 year. And then I started, I got my first car when the big thing when I was a kid, and today I guess all the kids want a computer, but when I was a kid, everybody wanted a car.
Right.
And that's what I did. The minute I got out of high school, I started working for my dad part-time, painting signs and lettering trucks and things like that. And I bought a 41 Ford convertible, and didn't have that too long. Then bought a 48 Merc convertible, and I was making pretty good money. But I ended up getting called up during Korea, and my life changed forever. But I got married before I left for the service. I had a boy. I was 20 years old, and after I was in the service for not even a year, about a year, they came to me and said that during Korea you weren't supposed to have any children, so they kicked me out. And I came back to Detroit, and I totally dedicated my life to hot rodding. I bought cars, and I was making good money working with my dad, and I joined a club. In fact, I joined several clubs, but the one I joined became part of the Michigan Hot Rod Association, which is now a membership. It's still going, and it's a club of several clubs. At the time when we formed it, there were about 100 clubs in the Detroit area, but of course a lot of them folded, and they wanted to have a legal drag strip. And so far as I know, they're the only club in America that they started a car show called the Detroit Autorama, which is going to be 72 years old next year.
Wow.
And it's still going strong. I think it's the best show in America. And they built their own drag strip, a concrete drag strip, in 1957. And I was a manager of it that year. So I was involved in drag racing for a while. But through all of that, if anybody knows anything about Detroit, they know about the Riddler Award.
Right.
And that's named after a guy by the name of Don Riddler, who the Michigan Hot Rod Association hired as a PR guy, a guy to help build a audience for the show. And Don became a personal friend of mine. I eventually became president of the Michigan Hot Rod Association. And Don saw that I had a love of the car show, and he encouraged me to start my own shows. And I did that in 1959. And I went up to Toronto in 1960, January. And believe it or not, I made $10,000 in 2 days.
Wow.
And I said, wow, this is a lot more fun than painting. And that was the beginning.
I love it.
So,
oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about. Can we go to the chat line for a moment and see if folks are out there to say hello? John?
Absolutely.
Who's visiting with us tonight?
Oh yeah, man. We have people here from coast to coast tonight. And Pete Moriello in Los Angeles says hi, everybody. Rich Panicaro in New Jersey says good evening. Tom Warren says hi, team. Tom here. I got the show on Marianne's YouTube channel. Randy Johnston says good evening, gents, from hot California. Island Girl says Miss K here. Enjoy the evening with Bob. Have a great show, gentlemen. And she says she's on a plane back to Southwest Salt Lake City.
Thank you, Kay.
Yeah, thank you, Kay. And Jack Red is with us tonight. He says hello, everyone. Ted Papacina just posted. He said, I went to the first show in New York City in 1962. Still have all my programs. The Alexander Brothers, Bud Anderson. Yeah. And
that was my show, and it was in the New York Coliseum, right on Broadway, and between 58th and 60th. And we ran that show for 22 years.
Wow.
It was great fun being there.
That's awesome. He says he still has all his programs, the Alexander Brothers and Bud Anderson. He says great times from 62 through the 80s. And some are signed by Big Daddy Roth.
Wow.
Well, that's exactly right. And in fact, I just did the Ed Roth event that his widow does every year out in Manti, Utah. Mm-hmm. Ed became a Mormon, moved to Utah, and that's where he's buried. And she has an event the first weekend in June every year that's pretty neat. I've really enjoyed it.
That's good. Is that where you met our Miss K?
It is, as a matter of fact.
You can't go through Utah without running into Kate Turkelson. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Who else is out there, John? Sorry, Bob. Go ahead.
Okay.
Mike Sidney just posted. He says, "Hey, Senior Chaz and I are listening."
I met Chaz when he lived in Chicago. That's Mike's brother, and I tried to hire him and his wife. I brought them to Detroit and showed them what a great city it was. But unfortunately, it was in the middle of the winter. And they said they wanted to get out of the snow country. And so they moved to Atlanta, and we're still friends. I don't see them as much, of course, as I'd like to, but great people.
Awesome. John, who else we have with us tonight?
For the moment, we're caught up.
Sounds great. Well, welcome everybody. Glad you're here, Teddy. I'm glad you went. We've all gone to those great auto rumbles. I've actually went to the Detroit one time, and when I was in high school, my buddy's friend piled us all into a car, 3 of us, and took us up there. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the Riddler Award. We've had Al Bergler on the show before, the great Motown chassis builder and tin guy. Did you know Al?
Oh, we were in the same club together, and I just saw him at an event on Saturday here in Detroit.
Wow.
He's almost as old as I am, but we were both in a club called MMAC, the Motor City Modified Auto Club, right. And that club is still going. It was formed in the late 40s. Wow. And one of the oldest clubs in America. We're not active in that club anymore, but that club became a major member club in the Michigan Hot Rod Association. And those organizations, like I say, they're both still very active. MHRA is still active in the Detroit Autorama. They're a partner in it and do a phenomenal job every year.
That's so amazing. And of course, he won that Riddler Award one year with his drag car.
The first year. Wow. He won the first one.
Fantastic.
In 1964.
Wow.
And his car, if I can get a plug-in for the Speedway Museum's Museum of American Speed in Lincoln, Nebraska, his car and 4 other Riddler winners are on display there.
Wow.
Along with, I think we've got 4 AMBR winners from the Grand National Roadster Show also. So it's a phenomenal museum that I'm happy to be a part of. And they've got my Red Baron there on display, which we built in 1968.
The famous
And,
Red Baron.
Yeah.
We all built the model, guys, didn't we?
Everybody that comes up to me says, I know that car. I made a model of it when I was 10 years old.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a real famous car, and I'm glad I was involved. Chuck Miller, one of the builders here in Detroit, built it for me the year after he won the Riddler with a car of his own. So a lot of memories and lots of people.
So amazing. So we were talking about when, you know, you came out of the Motor City Modified Auto Club, and then you and your brother Marvin Jr. started Promotions Inc.
That's right.
And about 59 or so, and you started putting on shows up in Canada, right? And elsewhere?
That's correct. Yes. Our first 3 shows were in Windsor, Hamilton. Of course, Windsor is right across the border from Detroit,
Yeah.
naturally.
It's actually south of
Hamilton,
Detroit, if you can figure that out.
yeah, that's right. And then Hamilton, which is up by Niagara Falls, and actually lost a few bucks on each of those. And I was quite skeptical, but my brother was. I'm optimistic, but he was more optimistic, and we already had the Toronto show scheduled, and I worked with a club up there. I worked with clubs in every city.
Right.
And the Corsairs in Toronto were a sponsoring club, and I became lifelong friends with a couple of the guys in that club, the Robertsons. And that's, like I say, we were very successful there, and that led to a number of other shows that same year. Buffalo was one of them. We worked with a clutch artist in Buffalo, and then my business just sort of took off. And then in 1961 was a big year for me because Oval Hall was opening in Detroit, and we were in the fairgrounds, which was an old, somewhat dilapidated facility, and there was a big discussion as to whether the show could move downtown or not. But at any rate, we moved the show downtown, and I became the producer of it. And I ran the Detroit Autorama from 61 to 94. Wow. When my son took it over. So that's what I did. That was our big one, and it still is today. It's one of the great shows in the country.
Well, I attended your 72, 3 or 4 event. I can't remember it, the fabulous Cobo Hall. It was great. Well, you started in 63, you started the International Show Car Association, which I know my friend Hayne worked for, and that's still in existence, right? Or is it still going?
Oh, yes. It's the sanctioning organization of all the shows. Some guys, some of the producers, the clubs and so forth that produce shows, like the Grand National Roadster Show, for example, they've been in and out. Sometimes they're a part of our championship, and sometimes they're not. So, but by and large, we usually have, a good number of shows for the enthusiasts to attend and win awards and all kinds of things. So, and I've even showed my car in a lot of shows like that. So my cars, I had a collection of cars at one time. So
I love it. Well, I always found it really fascinating when you had the judges at those shows. I think a lot of people maybe the guys on this call realize it, but how very strict the rules are for judging these cars. It's not just you pick your favorite, right? You've got very specific things to look at with certain quality measures and engineering. I don't know them all, but I know it's hard to do. Can you share a couple minutes with us on that?
Yeah, the ISA actually publishes a rule book, and it includes all the classes that they have and what they're looking for and that kind of thing. But most of the judges that are used, so far as I know, are ex-car owners and guys that showed themselves, so they know what to look for. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about hot rods or customs or Ferraris or whatever, the same kinds of rules apply, although everybody does it a little differently. Some people use a 100-point system. and some use more just a pick award sort of procedure to pick the winners. But at our shows, at the shows which are run today by Championship Auto Shows, which is my old company, they all use the ISCA rules and the rule book.
Amazing. Bob, let me take a couple seconds and see if anyone else has
Go ahead.
some thoughts. John, anyone else with the chat? A thought from the chat?
Not since the last time, but everybody's listening to you, Bob. Your stories are fantastic, man. We're enjoying it.
Well, I've seen John smiling and nodding and reading, and I'm just assuming, I was assuming there was a comment. So if someone has a question, John, just pop your finger up and we'll get you in. But thanks, everybody. These are great stories.
I made a post to ask anybody if they have some Autorama memories that they'd like to share. And I'm sure everybody's thinking that over right now.
I'll bet. Thank you, John. That's great. Well, Bob, you've written a number of books, including Showtime and Show Car Dreams. Tell us about those books and what led you to write them.
I've always been a history buff, and I always sort of wondered what would happen if young guys came along and wanted to know how all of this happened, the hot rod sport, basically, and how they could find out. And so way back in 1980, that's way back from now anyway.
Yeah.
And I ran into a book that was a 20-year book. And I thought, gee, that's exactly what I want. 20 years with the ISCA, with the car shows. And so I published a book, and that's Showtime. And I printed in America, in Flagstaff. And I was so happy doing that book that I eventually did other books. They weren't all about hot rods. We did the definitive history of the Hera Foundation, the museum in Reno, and the Briggs Cunningham Museum, which was down in Orange County. And then eventually, I got into automotive art, and we did a book on automotive art. And then what finally happened, that art thing really got me carried away, and we did art shows at SEMA for, well, we've been doing the show now. I've been working on it for over 30 years.
Wow. And
the same way at Pebble Beach, the Concord at Pebble Beach. And that keeps me involved. So the art thing sort of ties in with the books. And then since 2010, I published 4 books just about hot rodding.
Wow.
And the one that has sold the best was a book called Hot Rod Detroit, which was a history of hot rodding in the Motor City. And we sold over 5,000 copies of that.
Wow.
That one book. So we always have a book, and that's what I do when I go to car shows today. I sell books and some art, and try to keep busy and pay my expenses. So I enjoy it, and it gives me a chance to catch up with everybody.
I'll bet your autograph wrist gets a little tired there, Tyrion, isn't
it? I write my signature so you can read it. So.
Well, Bob, you've received several industry awards. 2 of the big ones were like the Hot Rod Magazine's one of the 50 people to make a difference in the automotive industry. And then, of course, your induction to the SEMA Hall of Fame back in 2012. Tell us about those events.
Well, that was a great honor. Probably the biggest honor I've gotten, I've received, was being told I was going to receive the SEMA award. That was in 2012, like you say, and they really do things great. You know, we went to a banquet, and I made a speech along with the other guys that were being inducted. One of them happened to be Bill France.
Wow.
He was already deceased, so they had a representative there to talk about him. But then the ones I'm most proud of is Hot Rod Magazine, for their 50th anniversary. They picked the top 100 hot rodders of the first 50 years.
Right.
and I was one of those, and then I also am in the Circle of Champions, which is the Hall of Fame at Autorama in Detroit, and I'm in the Hall of Fame at the Grand National Roadster Show, and so these are honors that I'm very proud of, and I don't take lightly. So
well deserved.
I guess I did something right.
You did. Yeah, the Oakland Roadster Show, gigantic West Coast event. So you had a lot to do with that one too.
There's only really two really big shows in the country in terms of attendance and prestige, in my opinion, and that's the Grand National Roadster Show and the Detroit Autorama. The Houston show, when we were in the Astro Complex down there, was the biggest show in size that we ever did. We had 1 million square feet.
Wow.
And no other building has anything like it. Possibly, of course, if you count the fairgrounds at Pomona, they've probably got more than that, but a lot of it's outside. And unfortunately, that entire complex, except for the Astrodome, has been torn down. So the buildings are all gone. And it was a great show when we had it there. We had a lot of stuff going on. We had a car auction. We had Woman's World. We had a swap meet. Anything we could think of, we did at that show. And we had a club called the Millwinders who sponsored that show with us for 50 years, and then they quit. And I call them the Magnificent Seven. There were 7 guys in the club. And they just did a phenomenal job of handling all the details of getting all the entries in and selling commercial space to exhibitors and that kind of thing, and working with us on that show. And that was really a terrific show. And in fact, the guy who was the producer of the Grand National Roadster Show came down there to see it because he had heard so much about it.
Right.
And of course, the Grand National Roadster Show, when it was the Oakland show, was actually a fairly small event. It didn't get anywhere near the size it is now until it came down to Portland, and that's really helped grow that show.
Amazing. Well, it just a memory jumped into my mind as I was listening to you talk about these things. Just the amount of work to put these on your day to day, even when you're there, you must have been just running around like so many things to do.
Well, in 1982, been in business for just a wee bit over 20 years. We ran 99 shows.
Wow.
And as I said, all over. But I had 35 employees, so I mean, I didn't even think about going to all the shows. I mean, I couldn't. I probably went to 8 that I managed, and it was usually in New York, Detroit, Chicago, Montreal, Toronto, and Houston.
Right.
Were the big ones that I ran most of the time. But I had really good guys. My son came with me when he was only 18. Bob Jr. Unfortunately, he passed away in 12.
Sorry.
But then I had a nephew that worked for me and a younger son. So there were a lot of Larivees hanging around the office, and we had our own office building. And at one time, we had 5 semis on the road hauling show cars that we had built or leased or bought. A lot of them came from California. And the best example I can give of that kind of a vehicle is, the Batmobile and the Knight Rider and the General Lee. Wow. These were what I always called the supercars because they really drew big crowds.
Yeah.
But that's what we specialized in. And then eventually in 1970, we got into TV celebrities and people like that, and that just changed our whole concept. So it was really something.
I want to chat about that in a moment because I remember my superstars I saw there. But John, is there a question from the chat?
Yes, we've had some activity here. Randy Johnston mentioned an early 60s Autorama in Fresno that was put on by Blakey Gigian.
Blackie Gigian.
Oh, okay. Blackie.
Blackie.
Okay.
He was an Armenian, and there's never ever going to be another person like Blackie. He was a real character and a personal friend of mine. And unfortunately, he passed away several years ago, but he ran that show for, I think, 51 years.
Wow.
And it was called the Fresno Autorama.
Wow.
Now, I posted that my first visit to Autorama inspired me. Big Al, the a la carte, Big Daddy Roth, 100 hot rods, dragsters, and custom cars. I thought I'd walked into heaven, and it's an honor to have you with us tonight.
Yeah, I do. Did you have another thought on there, John? Someone else?
Jack Red had a couple of questions. He said, did Hayne Dominic work for Bob?
Yeah, he ran the ISCA for quite a while, several years, maybe more. He and his wife, and moved to Detroit, and they had an office in Detroit that we had set up, and he did a great job with it. So, yeah, and became a good friend.
Okay, yeah, Jack Red. I wondered if you know Jack Red, Bob, because Jack was about your age, a little, maybe a year or two younger, maybe three. And he and I, he's an old friend of Haynes, and he knew all the ramrods, and he used to do Eastern drag news, and he ran a pro fuel circuit, so mostly on the drag racing side. But when we did your poster, John, of course, did this beautiful poster. Jack said, I'd recognize that guy. And I just wondered if you crossed paths back in the Ramrod days, perhaps.
I don't remember the name. I knew a lot of, I basically knew all the ramrods at one time. The guy named John Patterson and Charlie Clattenburg. And I mean, the list was sort of endless. It was a pretty big club.
Right.
And they were always really dedicated to drag racing.
Right.
And that's what they did. And they were very, very active. I always look forward to going to the Washington show, except in the beginning, I was a little petrified of the building manager, whose name was Frank Hayes. He was the manager at the DC Armory. And just to give you a quick note about him, he had a welcome mat outside of the door to his office, but it didn't say welcome. It said go away. and he was quite a character. He was so sure we were going to have a losing event. I had a couple of building managers that called me and said, Bob, we really think you're a nice guy, but we think you're going to lose a lot of money here. We think we'll just give you your deposit back and you can go away, and that happened in Toronto and in Washington that I specifically remember. And, well, fortunately or whatever, I guess I just didn't listen to them. But they still became good friends of mine. So, and that's what I tried to do. I tried to build friends with everybody. I always look forward. When I first arrived in the city for the show, I would try to take the building manager to lunch or something. A couple of times I was even invited to his house for dinner, wherever they were. And so I think that helped. And, we built a good relationship with everybody we worked with.
Sounds great. I love those ones at the Armory, and I've been to the ones downtown here, and even once went to the one when you did it out by Dulles, way out there in that expo center. So,
Bob, were you talking about Blackie just now?
Yeah, Blackie, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Randy Johnston just posted that Blackie and Iskey were great friends.
Well, Blackie knew everybody, and his show, he had one name for everybody. Everybody was Haas.
Yeah.
And that way he didn't have to remember names. So he'd see you might be on one side of the hall and he'd be on the other, but you'd hear him yell, "Haas, Haas." And he was really something. In fact, when he used to play at the tables in Las Vegas, because he would come to the SEMA show every year, and we also did a car show there for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sort of a terror on the tables, I'll tell you that. But a terrific guy. I mean, and the neat thing is he owned quite a few cars. All the MBR winners are from the Grand National Roadster Show.
Wow.
And I don't know if it was at our 50th here in Detroit, but he brought all those cars to Detroit and insisted that he would drive them from the truck to his spot on the floor. And he drove, I think we brought 5 cars in. I think we had Reliable truck them in. And he drove each of the cars to his spot and set them up and cleaned them and everything himself.
Wow.
And really a terrific guy. Everybody was Blackie's friend, believe me. Yeah, there were just a lot of people that we met that were just memorable people that I still think about. A lot of them are gone. There was another guy up there in the Bay Area that ran Sacramento, Harold Bagdasarian. We called him Baggy. And all these guys that ran these shows, even in the West Coast, became a part of the ISCA show circuit, which was called the International Championship Auto Shows. And they all joined eventually. It took some talking, but eventually I got them all to join. And but that was back in the 70s. And to digress for a second, to a guy out of Kansas City, Ray Farner, had a bunch of shows, I think about 10. And in a big deal, the biggest deal I ever did, I bought all of his shows.
Wow.
And he had shows in Portland and Seattle. So that put us onto the West Coast, and it just grew from there.
That's fantastic. It just great names, and all these members. Puts me in mind, and you being from Detroit, I have to ask you, did you know Todd Makrovich's father, who was, I believe he was a congressman, but he became Todd Mack down here and bought Maryland International Dragway and probably knew a lot of the ramrods. But his dad was from the Detroit area and had a lot to do with the international highway system.
Gee, I never heard of him. Yeah.
All into hot rod. Jack Red might be able to provide more details there, but yeah, I mean, just great men seem to know one another.
Well, I did get to meet with a lot of sophisticated guys, or however you want to describe the group. When I got involved with the Meadowbrook Concours. Meadowbrook is a 100-room Dodge mansion in Rochester, Michigan.
Wow. Right
here outside of Detroit. And we ran that event for over 30 years, 33 years or so. And I was on that committee, and I was chairman of that event back in the 80s. And then through that, and because of my sort of adventures in art, automotive art, I was instrumental in getting a group of artists into the Pebble Beach event,
right?
Which is probably the greatest automotive concours in the world.
Right.
Did that for 33 years. So I got to deal with artists from all over the world, England and the Czech Republic and Germany and Japan. And so it was really fun. And it was great to see the great skills that these people had. I still talk to some of them. But once that group dispersed after our 18 event was the last year, 2018, we haven't had a get together since then.
Great, Bob.
Unfortunately,
were these artists that covered all angles of motorsports, so all the motorsports plus all the hot rods plus all the, the other beautiful cars? So it wasn't just kind of hot rod artists or drag racing artists, kind of.
No, so the artists that worked at Pebble Beach, and mostly classic cars and exotics, and like Ferraris and stuff like that. But you know, these aren't just a painting of a car. There's a scene to it. There's a story behind every painting. So the car is doing something. And it was a very successful show. I'm sure everybody knows a little bit about ours. And they had about 25 artists, and they came from all over the country. We were sponsored by Lincoln out there, and they built us a portable building. And it was quite interesting. And we got a huge crowd. We'd open with a big cocktail party Saturday night. Everybody came, Jay Leno and all kinds of celebrities, and Junior Conway, who you guys don't probably know, but he was the most famous painter in California. Herschel Conway, and guys like that, and of course, these are guys with you know, quite wealthy guys with big fancy cars and stuff, like Duesenbergs and a lot of foreign cars. But nonetheless, I mean, like they might have a future thing. Well, I'll tell you what they did one time that was so successful. I don't know if you know what a Bugatti Royale is, but there were 5 or 6 of them built.
Okay, well, I knew what a Bugatti is.
Okay, well, this is a special one. It's a huge car with about a 36-inch wheel on it.
Wow.
And they were spread all over the world. There was at least one in Detroit. There was one in California. There were 2 in France. They brought all of these cars together one year and had them on the lawn right out in front of the hotel there, which is where the event takes place. And they flew these cars in from all over the world. And this was a big deal. Nobody ever before or since has seen all the Bugatti Royales together. And that's the kind of thing they would do there. Like when Shelby won at Le Mans, they had the 3 winning cars there, the 3 winning you know, Ford GTs there.
Right. Wow.
So I mean, where are you going to see that kind of stuff?
Lots of moolah involved, it seems.
Yeah. So I got to see all that stuff, and it was just fantastic, and it was really great. I love all kinds of motorsports, and I still love Formula One. So anyway.
Wonderful stuff, Bob. Oh my gosh. Well, you mentioned, so the art's just amazing, right? So I'm sure those well-to-do folks probably paid huge commissions for paintings of their cars at exotic locations. I mean, your artists.
Well, they do. And a lot of people, if they have like a private collection, they'll have, you know, specific pieces of art done about certain cars.
Right.
And that was great. Those are called commissions, and that was what that show was all about. Meadowbrook wasn't quite as fancy as Pebble Beach, but nonetheless had a really good selection of cars, and I was instrumental in getting them. Eventually, we had a hot rod class, and we had a muscle car class, and that muscle car class lasted almost every year once they started. It was so popular. They really wanted to keep that going. So, but anyway, those things were all fun to be a part of, and it was something I had no idea what I was going to get into when I started in this sport, and it just shows what you can accomplish. I mean, I was just an average hot rodder, a guy that loved cars, and when I was a teenager, loved racing in the city streets, and it all evolved into a career that, you know, was really pretty phenomenal for me, and gave me so much more than I had ever dreamt of.
Oh, wow.
Much more exciting than painting signs.
You bet. Oh, I think John's got a thought from the chat. John?
Yes, we have 5 new comments, and one of them is a question. Jack Red, we were talking about Todd Mack here a few minutes ago,
Right.
and Jack said Todd's dad was the starter of the interstate highway deal and later was a Supreme Court judge in Detroit.
Wow.
Wow.
And
I don't remember that name particularly, but
I don't either. And he had a question. He asked if you did any shows in Washington, D.C., and I think we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, we did the Ramrods for 50 years, 49 years.
Yeah, tell Jack everyone who ever saw the Armory was Bob show.
Yeah.
Kay Thurkelson just said, she said, I purchased one of Bob's books at the Ratfink reunion, and yes, Bob was kind enough to sign it for me. And she said she's got a slight flight delay, the Z list, listening as long as I can. Yeah. She said, looking forward to his new book being released at SEMA this year.
We hope.
Awesome. Well, great, Kay. I mean, I hate to have anybody delayed for a flight, but it gave you a chance to listen in. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's been a popular event here the last few days, hasn't it? And Chaz Sidney made a real nice post, and he said, you guys have a true legend tonight. Considering all the show and innovations Bob created and produced, there are not many people that put as many smiles on millions of people.
Indeed.
That's terrific.
And Ted Papasino said he has the Showtime book signed by Ed Big Daddy Roth.
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome.
Well, if you guys and the future broadcast, especially when I get my biography done, I'd be happy to send you samples of some of my books, and we could talk about them sometime.
Oh yeah, we'd love to have you come back on.
Well, the unfortunate thing is that I don't have any more copies. I only keep an inventory. The one book that I'm selling, which is called Hot Rod Dreams, is the red book with the Red Baron on the cover. Right. And you can't buy it at Amazon. You'd have to just try to find it on the internet or something. But anyway, I'd be happy to do that and send you. I've published a bunch of books, and I could send you samples of some of them, and then you could look at them. We could talk about them.
That sounds wonderful. Let's make a date. I'm ready.
Okay. Well, let's think about that around the end of the year.
Oh, it sounds good. Well, so we talked about the great Pebble Beach and the Meadowbrook show with all the wonderful art, but you're also like a down and dirty racer too, right? And you from 51 to 77 ran a circle track up in Michigan, right? Or were you racing there?
I'd like to think I wasn't down and dirty, but yeah, I mean, unless I was working on the car, which I had a really good crew, to tell you the truth, that took care of things. But yeah, that's what I did. And it was pretty interesting. We raced in Canada a lot in the last years, and we did really good. And there was a circuit sponsored by Carlings and Export A, a beer and a cigarette. And they ran 24 races of 100 laps or more from Windsor to Halifax. And if you know where Halifax is, it's on the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, Nova Scotia, baby.
So I had 2 cars. They were called Ed Howe cars. They were Ed Howe chassis. And then we had to run steel bodies. So we ran 70 Camaro bodies. We'd go to the junkyard and get a body. And now they use plastic on all these cars, but they still run a class called either super lates or whatever, a comparable car. And we ran all those races for a couple of years and really had fun. And in one year, I finished second in the 250 lap race up at Cayuga, which was a 5/8 mile track by Niagara Falls. And I hate to tell people my big throw was finishing second, but they started about 40 cars, and this was in the heyday of those kinds of cars. So there were a lot of cars, and there were other Americans racing too, because they had some pretty good purses, and so I really enjoyed that, and I had a couple of my guys that worked for me that we didn't do shows in the summer because our shows were all indoors. So mainly it was a winter job, but we spent the summers getting ready. There was a lot of work to do to get ready. We had a lot of equipment, and we published a program for the show season. So we were pretty busy, but we could still take off to go racing, and so that was really, really fun. And the Canadians were great drivers. One of them was Earl Ross, who was the only Canadian to be the NASCAR Rookie of the Year. He had won a NASCAR race. And and so, they were, the bulk of them were good drivers, really good. And I don't know, you probably never heard of the guys I raced with, but one of them, who was a really good friend of mine, if I couldn't make a race, he would race. But on the circuit, I did all the driving. But Joe Ruttman, whose brother was the youngest winner at Indy for years, I think he still is, I'm not sure. I think he won Indy when he was about 20. And Joe Ruttman was one of the drivers, and Dick Trickle and Bob Seneker. These are famous short track racers.
Sure. Well, Trickle did a little NASCAR too, didn't he?
Yeah. I think they all tried it. So did Ruttman, but he ran NASCAR trucks.
Gotcha.
And he did real good. He finished about second in the points, but he never got into the cars. I don't know why. He just seemed to stay in the trucks.
Gotcha. Well, Bob, you mentioned those souvenir programs you used to do during the summer. Didn't you used to sell? Tell us how many you sold per year.
Well, eventually, when we had all of our shows going, we would sell 300,000 to 400,000 a year.
Wow!
So the only hot rod magazine that sold more copies than we did was Hot Rod Magazine. We outsold every other magazine that was on the newsstands.
Wow! And
eventually, what Peterson did was they bought. We took. I don't know if it was 5 years or 10 years. I think it was 5 years. Every 5 years, they had a guy take our program and put it together for them, like five issues, and take all the ads out.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually put them on the newsstand, and it was called the best. We called it the Hot Rod Show World Annual, and they called it the Best of Hot Rod Show World Annual.
Got it.
And I have a complete copy, a set of those. I think we did it for 10 years because we published that magazine for 35 years or so. I mean, and we also published, since we used Playmates for a lot of our models, we also published a somewhat sexy big calendar, and we sold about 80,000 of those a year.
Wow.
So, of course, the thing regarding ladies was a lot different at that time. And then we would get some of the Playmates to make personal appearances with us at SEMA and shows like that.
Right.
And Detroit and so forth, the big shows. But it was fun doing all that stuff. And today there's still people out there collecting some of those magazines.
Oh, I'll bet.
They were really neat. And I don't know, when my son took over the business in '94, he decided he didn't want to mess with that part of it. In the first place, he didn't have anybody who he thought could put it all together, and he didn't have the time running the company. So they just did away with it. And so that's what happened to the programs. So there aren't. He did a couple. He tried after the '90s, but I think he did it 2 years, and then that was the ending of it.
Right.
So
I miss the
anyway,
bag, but it's a different world now, unfortunately. You see everything online
Yeah.
here. And
yeah, if I could elaborate on that for a minute, we were the biggest booker of playmates in the country for 20 years.
Wow.
And we knew them extremely well, not Hefner, but the girls that ran Playboy Promotions.
Right.
And that's who we dealt with. And we could meet in the mansion if we wanted to. All I had to do is say, hey, my in-laws would like to see the mansion. Can we meet over there this time? And we would only meet once a year usually, or twice a year at the most.
Right.
And then we tried to put together some kind of special promotions. And the most successful one we ever did was also the most expensive. For years, I tried to book all 12 playmates from a given year into a couple of shows.
Right.
Most shows couldn't afford it, but Houston and Detroit, we did it. We did 2 shows, and we had most of the girls were from the current year, and then we filled out the months with girls from that month, but from other years.
Wow.
And that was extremely successful, very, very successful.
I
But
bet
it
the
also
lines were
was-
huge.
It was expensive, yeah. And I just couldn't afford to do it enough shows.
They just
But-
sort of like signed posters and I sort of what did it look
We
like?
had pictures made.
Got
We
it.
had pictures made. They just signed them. They were free. And that was
Oh.
another thing. If you just wanted a signature, the pictures were free. They were black and white. And like with most of our celebrities, if you wanted a nice picture, a colored picture, and then you had to pay for it. They were
Mhm.
usually $5 or
Right.
so. But that was fine. You got a free one if you just wanted an autograph. Like the guy we used the most, probably for the most years, was Adam West,
Yeah. Huh.
who became a personal friend of mine.
Wow.
I've been to his house. I've had dinner with him and his wife. Of course, he's passed away now.
Yeah.
But
Very popular.
a
Part of
really
that
good
scene,
guy
the
to work
Batman
with.
and Hot Rod scene where I talked to Draglers from that era. They loved Batman. They were always following that show. And of course,
Well,
we
we took
love
the
that guy.
attitude that nothing was too ridiculous or outlandish. If we thought it would draw people, if we thought the people wanted to meet these people, like it was very successful with the Dukes. The Dukes of Hazzard. We were able to book almost the entire cast.
Wow.
And became really good friends with John and the
Tom
other guy.
Wopat was the other fellow.
Yeah, Tom Wopat. Yeah. I knew them both. In fact, if they saw me today, they'd say hi to me because they still remember me. So,
Sure.
but anyway, that's what we did.
When I was 12, so here's my story. I met the guy, the strongman guy, whose name escapes me right now, from Mission Impossible. Oh, well, he was from the guy from Mission Impossible, the member of the team.
Oh, that's Peter Lupus.
Peter Lupus. So I have a Don the Snake Prudhomme model box with Peter Lupus's signature on it. So there you go. Facebook guys and gals. I've got that somewhere. I don't know where, but
wasn't that Vince
we were
Edwards?
The first ones to really use a lot of celebrities, and we used, we started with Adam and Bert, then we went with the guys from Adam 12, Kent McCord and Marty Milner.
Right.
And they both now passed away. Kent just died this year. And the list is sort of endless who we used because we had so many shows,
Well, I saw a kid from the Fast and Furious 10 years ago, whenever it was that came out. That was at the convention center in DC. So it's been a while.
Yeah.
John, you had a thought, pardon me, Bob, but I cut you off a little bit, I think.
Well, I thought the guy on Mission Impossible was Vince Edwards, but I could be wrong about that.
Well, there were several, but Peter Lupus.
Oh, yeah, there were more than one. There were a number of guys.
Yeah, there were. And Leonard Nimoy was on it too for a while. But Jack Red had a question. Jack
I
Red
knew
asked,
Leonard.
he said to ask Bob why they changed the name from Speed Equipment Manufacturing Equipment to the new name.
Specialty equipment. I think they were
That's it.
concerned about the word speed.
Maybe it's during that van craze of the 1970s when you couldn't pick up a hot rod or a car craft without seeing vans all over the place.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, in the beginning, the word hot rod was a negative term.
Yes, it was.
It was sort of a derogatory kind of word that people didn't want you to have a hot rod or be a hot rodder or something like that, you know. And that's why in the beginning, when I started my company, all my guys wore suits and ties to our shows, and we tried to show that we were respectable, I guess. And when we were dealing with the automotive industry, we always, you know, wore a suit to the meetings. And yeah, I think that's the thing with that, and I think that's why they dropped the name Speed.
Well,
Y'all
Bob,
did it right. You know, absolutely.
it's been such a great visit with you. We've gone over. I promised you 45 minutes, and here we are. I've taken 60. You've just been a wonderful guest. And we'd love to have you come back and talk about the books, right? The autobiography you're having me done.
Be happy to do that. I'll keep in touch with you guys.
Well, you've just been wonderful. And 5 kids, 13 grandkids. You know all the movie stars. You know all the playmates. You know George Barris. You know Ed Big Daddy Roth. And I mean, the list
I went
goes
to
on and
both.
on.
I went to Barris's and Ed Roth's funerals because they were such great friends of mine. I really respected them. They were just great people to work with. And, you know, I bought the Outlaw Bandit and Mysterian from Ed Roth back in the early 60s. So it was, to tell you, you know, my life was like being on a roller coaster. I mean, I had no idea this was all going to happen. And I really don't know how we did it, but somehow we made it work, and it's been a blast. So anyway, thanks for the time.
Well, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Larivee, Sr., one of the greats in hot rodding and automotive specialties within the entire world for the entirety of almost the time hot rodding has been a thing. Sir, thank you so much for visiting with us, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon.
Well, thank you very much, Bill and John, and I look forward to doing this again in the future.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Bob Larivee, thank you, sir. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Oops, I'm sorry. Cut him off a little bit. Sorry, that was Bob Larivee. And he was via phone, of course. So, and that was, but that's great. I think maybe without having, that's what we wanted with Bob, is to have him old school. So, ladies and gentlemen, what a great show. He was amazing. I know we've gone a little bit late, but hey, we're going to stick with it. And let me turn it over to John Bachman for this week's JB's Take and the Racer of the Week. John?
Thanks, BP. My pick for Racer of the Week is Joe Lou Greco from Edinburgh, Pennsylvania. I've been friends with Joe for 6 years, and tonight I'm giving the update on his 1970 Pontiac GTO Judge bracket racer. It's an outstanding and highly competitive hot rod. Lou is a multi-talented and extremely dynamic person. In addition to his great hot rod, he is a top musician in the Northeast region, and he is a committed fan of Fender Telecasters. He recently acquired a vintage 1952 Telecaster reissue, and it is an absolutely gorgeous guitar. It's an honor to feature Joe Lou tonight. Lou has decades of experience on the quarter mile. He's been racing for 34 years, and he's traveling the big money bracket racing circuit. Recently, he ran 2 entries at a 7-car field and drove his friend William Prest's top dragster for a pass, and he said it's definitely a thrill ride. But Joe Lou's band Trainwreck is a top-notch country rock outfit, and in addition to playing concerts and clubs, they have provided the musical entertainment for several drag racing events. And Joe is the lead singer, and he puts on a fantastic show. His GTO Judge bracket car is powered by a TrickFlow 565 cubic inch big block Chevy with a Power Glide transmission from LJ's Automotive, Greco's Garage, and is set up to run in his index. He has several notable wins. He recently installed an Abruzzi transmission vent kit, and he said it's the best, and he recommends this equipment. Lou thanks his sponsors, TrickFlow Specialties, Mickey Thompson, Wiseco, Abruzzi Trans and Converters, TFC Trucking, Penske Racing, Advance Auto Parts, GZ Motorsports, APD Carbs, and Moser Engineering. Lou was runner-up at Dragway 42 Sportsman Drag Racing Hootenanny in May to start his season. Well, Lou, I appreciate your great input on your racing. You're one of the best out there. We wish you good luck, safe racing, and the best of times in the future. Today is my son Kyle's 40th birthday. Those years flew by in the blink of an eye. His birth changed my life as much as it began his. I can pinpoint that day as the day my new life began, and to this day I rejoice in Kyle's journey, and I reaffirm my own commitment to being a good person, and to make every day count for something good, and to make every note I play mean something. I thank Kyle every day for being who he is and for helping me to improve my life. I turned 40 35 years ago. I've slowed down some, but I haven't shown signs of dementia. I made a vow to quit driving in October of 2025. I'll be 76 at that time. I don't feel safe out there anymore, and I swear that I wouldn't end up in all kinds of trouble like my dad and my father-in-law did until they took their driver's licenses away. I'm making that choice for the benefit of my family first and for the safety of everybody else. I'm choosing life. I'm not saying anybody else should do this. It's your choice, But I'm putting my pride away before I do something stupid out there and end up with truckloads of problems in my mid-80s like I saw my dad do. I'm getting out while I'm still able and I'm still safe. Everybody stay safe and well. You are the most important part of this show, and we love you all. We look forward to having you all with us every week. It's a great way for us to spend an hour together on a Monday night. I'll see you all next time. God bless America. Back to you, BP.
Thank you, John. And we're back here with our friends Danny, my dear friend, departed about a year and a half ago. And of course, my dear friend John with me on here twice, one live and one Memorex here. Let's go through our wrap at the end of the show. Oops, I have lost my notes. Pardon me just a moment. Maybe that's what I think my notes are hidden by another feature. So let's talk about what's going on. One thing I did want to talk about, we mentioned a little bit with Bob, is that I had just a marvelous time. Jack Red and I ran up the road or ran out west here to Manassas, Virginia, to the Ramrods reunion. And we just had a wonderful time. Thanks to Lenny Cottrell, the old Chicken Chokers racer, if you always remember Lenny, and his lovely wife and daughter for hosting the event at their home. Our friends Hayne Dominic, Gary Gore, Cindy Monroe, the famous author, Rick Osborne of 38 Special, and many other members of the Ramrods. My eternal embarrassment for not writing all the names down when I was there, but Jack can share them all. We just had a wonderful time, and thanks so much to Len and his lovely family for opening up the house. Put on about 5 pounds, do that wonderful food and that big old dessert tray. But it was really great to meet all the Ramrods and to see them again in many cases. Lovely to meet Len's wife and daughter, and really had a lot of fun hanging out with Cindy Monroe, who did that wonderful Gasoline Alley book here from DC. And while we were there, she was wearing a Bruce Wheeler t-shirt, a Wheeler Dealer Top Fuel t-shirt. So we texted Bruce. I took a couple pictures of her, texted those out to Bruce, and got a really nice note from him back today saying hello to Cindy and to all of us. And of course, Bruce knew all the Ramrods guys. So anyway, we went all the way out to Hawaii with that, through the internet there, and got that lovely note back. So it was a really nice, really nice day. Let's talk about some upcoming guests. We want to thank our Miss K, who hopefully by now is in the air, but if not, hello, my dear. July 29th, we do have the next 2 weeks booked. So next Monday night, we're going to have Gasser great Bones Baylog. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the top Gasser racers of all time, Mr. Bones, is coming here to Draglist Live. That's next Monday, the 29th. Gasser great Bones Baylog. Do not miss it. On August 5th, we're going to have funny car and top fuel racer Scott Stratford from the great state of Utah. So Nitro from the desert coming our way on August 5th. August 12th, we had a show booked, but I cannot make that date. I will be visiting someone and can't do the Monday night. So we're going to book for the 19th and then the 26th. And so we had a great guest set up for the 12th. We've asked him if he can move that on. And I'll only tell you who it's going to be. It was Corey Mack, the top fuel racer and the funny car racer and the all-around great guy who's got a big show coming up himself this year. Corey Mack, hopefully on August 19th. He was all set for the 12th, but unfortunately, I can't make that date. So thanks to Miss Kay Turkelson, who's been just rocking this producer role, and she kind of fell into it. We had her on the show, and we hooked her, and now she's just sharing that she just loves doing it with us and doing it on behalf of all you folks. John?
I heard through the grapevine today that Corey Mack is cool with the 19th, but we'll get that 100% here any minute now.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Yeah, that's the one thing. Last week, my new job kind of keeps me busy day and night. And last week, between Kay and John, I didn't have any interact. They put the posters together. They set up the guests. They got it all lined up. And I just showed up. And I'm getting kind of spoiled. It's pretty sweet. So
that's okay. We knew what to do.
Yeah. We got it down now. Let's go into our sad part of the evening here. Those we lost. This is quite a long list this week. So let's get going. A couple of racers early on that we missed last week at this time, but I did want to mention them. One was Dave Saddam, was a dragster racer who died in an accident at Woodburn, Oregon, on the 24th of June. We didn't mention Dave then, just heard about it recently. So farewell to Dave. Sorry about that. Again, we did mention just last week the top sportsman racer who passed, Mr. Janke. And it's a scary sport. Ron Capps exploded yesterday, but it was fine, thank goodness. It's every time you go out there, you're not guaranteed, but farewell to Dave. And he was, small consolation to say he was doing what he loved, but he was doing what he loved. Also on the 9th, Waldemar Rodriguez, aka Ron Wald. He drove one of those cool new I forget, I don't even know what they call them, the actual muscle cars, kind of like Mark Powell drives, that new category of race car, which I actually need to get on the drag list because it doesn't look like they're going away. So I'm going to have to make a category for him. But farewell to Waldemar Rodriguez. On the 10th, Ron Millhouse passed away. He was a racer, co-worker, barbecue pitmaster, and a good friend of Hugh Monroe. So Hugh, thanks for sharing that, sir. That's Ron Millhouse. On the 13th, Steve Gibbs shared this with us. Jeff Crowther has passed away following a brief illness. Jeff was a fixture in the drag racing community for many, many years. Farewell to Jeff. On the 17th, and Brett Kepner shared this, George Poteet, the man who made more 400-mile-an-hour runs than any other human in combined, really. He's owned every single record for nearly every category of car on the salt flats. In fact, I think Brett said there's only one class that he never raced. But George Poteet, just a giant in the land speed record side of our sport, passing away on the 17th. So farewell to George. Also on the 17th, Neil Britt, a well-loved NHRA photographer, a lot of friends here online, probably Teddy Papacina and others know him very well. Certainly Jack Red knows him very well. Neil Britt, one of our great photographers, passing away on the 17th. And then on the 19th of July, Steve Woods, the West Coast gasser great, passing away. He had that cool little, I think it was a Plymouth Cricket, station wagon gasser that just tore up, like, I think Comp Eliminator back in the 70s and perhaps into the early 80s. And Steve Woods also, when the nostalgia gasser craze came in, he did a bunch of great work then as well, back in the nostalgia days, in the early O's, perhaps the late 90s, early 2000s. So farewell to Steve Woods, a name that we all read in the magazines. And then the 21st, we lost Norm Wilcox, Nitro, Top Fuel, and funny car racer. Norm, probably most famous for driving the Simpsons Skyjacker Top Fuel car. And then in 1975 was the driver of the Hawaiian, when Roland Leong had the cinnamon red Monza, actually very famous for catching it on fire at Ontario at the World Finals that year. But farewell to Norm Wilcox, just a guy that, he was just one of the great names from my childhood. And I know very, very well loved and respected around the sport. And finally, on the 22nd, just today, Brett Goeth out of Colorado shares that his friend Gary Fratis passed away, and put love up on the internet saying farewell to Gary. And Gary was photographed with a bike. I don't know if he was a drag racer, but he was certainly a friend of one of our great drag racers in Brett Goeth. So gigantic list of names, solid 10 or so. It's going to happen to us every week, guys, but we just want to send our condolences to the family and many, many friends of these racers, and thank them for the thrills. Certainly folks like Neil Britt bringing us the action every week. Folks like George Poteet, again, going 400 miles more than anybody else combined, which is pretty amazing. So farewell to those we love and those we shared the track with and the sides of the track with, in the case of Mr. Britt. So that's pretty much it for our event. John, any final thoughts before we do our final wrap?
Well, yes, this was a fantastic experience, getting to meet and talk with Bob Larivee Sr. Brought back so many memories, and his memory is razor sharp. I mean, he can go back all the way to the beginning, and he knows every detail. It was just fantastic. I was spellbound listening to him. We've had a lot of great guests on this show over the years, and one of the only one that I can compare to this guy was Ed Iskandarian, and but Bob Larivee Sr. is a walking encyclopedia of hot rodding history, and it was just great to have him with us tonight.
Yeah, and absolutely.
I don't know who got him. I don't know if it was you or Kay that got him lined up, but
Miss Kay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it was Kay.
Miss Kay met him at the Rat Think reunion, and next one thing led to another. She turned on her charms, and here we go.
She did great.
She's amazing.
Well, I'm looking forward to the Bones Belo show. I saw him run here in Houston in 1965. He had a AA gas supercharged Willys, and he tore the place up, and it was great. He's an all-time great. So we're going to have a great show next week, folks.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Looking forward to it. So let's do our final thanks to, first of all, the Bob Larivee Sr. He was unbelievable, as John mentioned. Great to hear the other side of the sport. I love drag racing, but I'm a car guy overall, and a hot rod guy and a car show guy, having been to many of the events he put on and not realizing that he basically was the guy for all these years that we've all enjoyed. So thank you, Bob. Looking forward to having you back on. Of course, John Bachleman, my brother, Kay Turkelson, our new producer. We kind of looped her in, and she's like, again, sharing that she really loves doing it, and I love having her do it. Thank you so much. Rob McCabe, who is dropping in the new NHRA stats for us and doing a great job. Thank you, sir, on the drag lists. And of course, thanks forever to our brother, Danny White. Thanks to Jeff Gilder from Zeus Digital Marketing, Racers Reunion, and the Wingding Media. You can click the like and click the share even now if you want to share this with your friends. And we're trying to end, and click the old subscribe there, because this is the YouTube on our new format. And check in on draglist.com every day to see what's new. We had all the results up from Seattle, which was quite a cool event. And of course, lots more stuff of David Oakes, and lots of David Oakes photos exclusively up there quite often. So first of all, or finally, really, not first of all at all, but next week, we'll see you for Bones Baylog, and we'll ask him how to say it. I think it's spelled below, but I think it's Baylog. But we'll check on that and validate before we get on, and we'll figure out who. If I've been saying it wrong, I've said it wrong. I said below for years, and I said Baylog the last couple of years, because I think I heard that. Rocky Perone can call me and tell me what's right, because he knows all the gasser guys. But we'll ask Mr. Bones before we get him on. And folks, have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful week. On behalf of John, Kay, Rob, and our guest Bob, it's been wonderful having you with us. Have a good week, folks, and we'll catch you next Monday night. Bye-bye.